Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today we are talking about one of the oldest premiums in the game, and a ship that is in dire need of a bit of love for more gaming, and that is the Tier 7 Polish destroyer, the Błyskawica, which is lightning in English. So, this ship was first released all the way back in December of 2015. This ship is going to be 7 years old in one more month, give or take. That's quite old. And this ship has seen, well, every single rework that's ever hit the game. And she has been, I think to say she has been surpassed would be a bit of an understatement in terms of what's happened to the Błyskawica here. She started out life in the game as being one of the best destroyers in the game. It's definitely one of the best Tier 7 gunboats. But over time, I mean, again, just with some of the crazy ships we've gotten, even down at Tier 7, she's a far cry in terms of what she used to be. Which is kind of sad because this is a real still historical ship. You can see this ship today in Poland in Gdynia, which I think that's how you say that. Which, funny enough, we're getting a new Polish destroyer by the name of Gdynia as well with the upcoming Pan-Euro destroyer split. So that is pretty neat that you can see the ship in real life. And like with all historical ships, it's upsetting to myself and I know quite a few others when our real still historical ships don't get the best representation in game when they get their digital versions. Now, you might also be looking at the ship on screen and the picture of the real life ship that I just threw up here and be thinking, wait, Sealord, it's clearly incorrect, right? Well, if you look at the destroyer in game, the Błyskawica in game, she has 720mm guns. If you look at the real life version today, she has 8 100mm guns. So one could argue that she's not in the correct setup, which technically you'd be right, but you're also wrong because in game this is the 1937 pre-war version of the Błyskawica. After the war, she was refitted a couple of times, and she was refitted in 1941 with 101mm guns, and then in 1951-52 with 100mm guns. And since these are not the Nippon Steel 100mm guns of the IJN destroyers, you wouldn't want to use those anyway. I believe those would struggle to pin, yeah, like even 18mm, 19mm of armor with the normal HE pin values. So, yeah, that would be not the best. So, the ship today, in-game, what is she? Well, she used to be one of the best Tier 7 destroyers. Hands down, gunboat destroyers for sure. Her torpedoes were always a little lackluster, and they're very lackluster today when compared to what we have in game. In terms of her gun performance, again, she's been pretty much eclipsed by definitely the French destroyers, and now we have the Italian destroyers with SAP. I mean, shoot, the mid-tier Italian destroyers from like Tier 6 to Tier 8, well, I guess mid to upper tier Italian destroyers, but even the Tier 5 and 4 are great as well. They absolutely dominate when it comes to DD versus DD engagements because of their SAP shells. And the Błyskawica here just kind of got, well, left behind in the dust. She did receive a few small buffs as time went on. She got a reload buff that got her reload down from 6.5 to 6 seconds back in 8.9, which, you know, this is a pretty significant buff to a destroyer's reload time. And then in 9.0, she also got some buffs to her firing angles to her gun. The first turret got a 10-degree buff, the second turret got a 1-degree buff, and the fourth turret got a 15-degree buff. And her torpedoes also got a slight buff to their firing angles as well, 8 degrees to the bow and 2 degrees to the stern. So besides that, though, that's pretty much it. After the, well, shoot, man, if you were playing back in the day, you didn't have to deal with the smoke firing, well, not the smoke firing, but the stealth firing mechanics that were in play back in the day. Now, that version of the ship was very spooky. There used to be this mechanic in place to where you could stealth fire, which is, you know, fire without being detected, and you can imagine the pain of having a destroyer that could do that and just rain hell down upon you like the Błyskawica here could very much do. But of course that got changed, and nothing was really done about that. I mean, not just for this ship as well, but there's a ton of other ships that didn't get any compensation for that change, because there's quite a few ships that could stealth fire back in the day, and that's another video for another time. But anyway, yeah, besides that, the ship's been left pretty much the same, with all this new gimmicky ships we're getting in the game, all these new crazy destroyers and radar cruisers that are even now kind of starting to bleed their way down into Tier 7. And that's not even talking about Tier 7 matchmaking now. I mean, do keep in mind that this ship will usually be in at least Tier 8 games most of the time. The gameplay watching in the background, she is lucky enough to have gotten into a Tier 7 game here, and it's mostly Tier 6 and Tier 5 ships. And this is where the ship is still able to stretch its legs pretty well. And this was a pretty fun match. This is from last night's stream. I was streaming on Monday night instead of Friday night this week. And, well, no, last week. So we're still streaming on Friday night this week if you're looking forward to that, which I hope to see you there. But this was a match we were playing because of stream. You guys wanted me to see what was one of the least played ships I had in my port, and it was the Błyskawica here. I've played this ship, I think, a handful of times in like co-op, or I think 1 or 2 operations, but in terms of random battles, not too much. You can definitely tell that this is a much older premium than the other ships in the game. Which, I mean, there's some very good things about this ship. Her shell flight ballistics are very nice. I only have a 13-point commander on this ship, by the way. If I had a higher point commander, I could take AFT and get this gun range out by another 20%, which would be out to about 13-14 kilometers. And the shell ballistics are definitely comfortable enough to make use of that, but she still has that 6-second reload time, which again, I could take BFT and get that down to 5.5 seconds. And she is still pretty darn good at starting fires. She has an 8% fire chance to start a fire per shell, which back in the day with, you know, a 6.5 second reload time, that was really good. Today, it's gone from being one of the best fire starters to just being an okay fire starter. And you can imagine, of course, with the design of the ship back in the day having to take all those other factors into account, her other factors are fairly mediocre. Her torpedoes aren't that great. They travel at 57 knots. You only have an 8-kilometer firing range with your torpedoes. They do about 14,400 maximum damage as well. And this was, of course, well before we had the Pan-Euro line even become a thing. And in fact, the ship wasn't even in the European tech tree. She was in her own separate Polish tree by herself for a very long time. I believe like 4 or 3 patches ago they moved her into the Pan-Euro tech tree. So, as well, of course, with everything else about the ship, she has... it's pretty much mediocre. Her top speed, she is fairly fast for a Tier 7 destroyer. She does have her engine boost consumable at hand. If she has her engine boost going, she can get well over 40 knots. Her max speed is 41 knots. So that is pretty good. She can get up to, I think, 44, 45 knots with her engine boost going, which is, again, very nice. But her maneuverability... 5.8 second rudder shift time, and her turning radius is 610 meters, which is quite wide. Now, I would imagine with a higher point commander on this ship, she probably would be able to do decently well. I'm not sure if I want to take IFHE and cut back on that 8% fire chance, because, I mean, you take IFHE on the Błyskawica, that will get your HE pins up to, let me check here, yeah, 25 millimeters, which by Tier 7 standards is really decent. You'll be able to deal with definitely just about every cruiser you run to in Tier 7, but then you run to the situation with the fact that this is a Tier 7 ship, and she's going to get up tier to Tier 8 and Tier 9 games, where 32 millimeters becomes standard on battleships. So even if you take IFHE, you won't be able to reliably farm battleships down, which, again, with the way matchmaking goes today, you're going to be in those higher tier matches much more often than not. So I personally would want to preserve that 8% fire chance, because, again, fires, all you gotta do is hit the ship on the deck or near the deck, or in some cases in the propeller, and a fire will get started no matter what. Whereas with the IFHE, you still have to find the parts of the ship where you can pin that 25 millimeters of armor. Now, one thing I will say is that her AP is actually surprisingly good. Again, with the nice ballistics and the flight time of the shells, it wasn't too hard to aim for the lighter armored portions of the ship that this AP could get through, and I am upset with myself that I didn't think to hit the 2 key until I got to the end of the match, which I probably could have chewed through. I believe it was one of the Dutch destroyers that I ran across if I had swapped to AP instead of just keep spamming HE at it. So overall today with the Błyskawica, I think she's still one of the better DD hunters today, but that's about it. When she's at tier 7 too. When she does find herself up tiered to tier 8 and tier 9, good God. There's so many DDs at that tier now that will absolutely just kick her in the teeth and run away quite easily. I mean, Kid, for example, is a better anti-DD DD, and of course that's a tier 8, but that's a ship that she's going to come across with the way matchmaking goes today. And I'm not saying no, she should be buffed to the point of where she can easily take on tier 8 DDs, but it's no competition in a lot of cases. And I understand, you know, balancing a tier 7 ship to be able to be decent at tier, 6 and 5 games and also be okay and tier 8 and 9 games is a pretty tall order, but she's kind of just been left in the dust. There's been quite a few reworks that, again, have shafted her in one way or the other, like with the Commander rework, with, smoke firing rework, Man, again, when the ship's been along for the entire ride, she's seen quite a few changes, and she really hasn't been compensated well for that. Again, the few changes that we have gotten with this ship has been appreciated, but I think she needs a little bit more love from Wargaming. Maybe a nice little decrease to her detection range, or another little reload buff, or a little bit of a... They could potentially give you the option to swap out her torpedoes with the new Pan-Euro torpedoes, the longer range, faster speed ones. I mean, her alpha is already pretty low on her torpedoes anyway, so I don't see why you couldn't, give them a little speed boost or a range boost, or again, give you the option to select some torpedoes that are more in line with the new Pan-Euro DDs. And if you would do that, again, she'd be more in line with the family that she's with, and I think that would be a pretty good pickup for her all in all. But anyway, guys, what do you guys think about this in the comments down below? It's just the first time I picked up this ship in quite some time, and I think she needs a little love. Again, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Wednesday. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 45,000 subs, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Hope you'll have a wonderful Wednesday. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving if you don't hear from me before then. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.